Welcome, everyone. My name is Maria Barranco with Monarch Services. I am one of the program managers who oversees our 24-hour programs in our prevention program. Today, we will be discussing about Monarch Services in depth. You will have an opportunity to ask questions and learn more about what Monarch provides and how to best support survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. This webinar will be recorded, so you will have access to this webinar after. You're more than welcome to email us and request a copy. We are more than happy to provide you copies of the slides as well. And once again, welcome, and we're very excited that you're here today, and we're going to have our presenters introduce themselves.
Hi, thank you so much for joining, and thanks, Maria. My name's Eileen, and I'm an on-call and shelter advocate here at Monarch.
And good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Dalia Ochoa, and I'm the Education and Community Outreach Advocate with Monarch Services. And thank you again for your time and for being here. And we will get started.
So first, just a little overarching points about what Monarch Services is and our goals. Monarch Services has been a safe haven for individuals and families who are survivors of sexual assault, human trafficking, and domestic violence for over 44 years. Our mission is to fight for lives free from violence and abuse. And the vision of Monarch Services is to empower individuals, families, and our community to take action against violence and abuse. Through our services that Dalia will explain a little bit later, we work towards this mission.
And yes, please, as mentioned in the chat, if there's any questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll answer them as we can, or we can save it till the end, whatever's more comfortable for everyone. So quickly, a brief overview. Of course, we will talk in depth about every single service that we have on this slide. This is an overview of all the different services we offer at Monarch Services. The first one being our crisis/support line. It is available 24 hours a day, any day, and anyone is welcome to call, meaning, the age doesn't matter. We are bilingual on the crisis line, so we serve both Spanish and English. And just to highlight all our advocates on the crisis line, we have about 20 or so currently, and they are all extensively trained to respond to different types of crises that might come through the crisis and support line, but they're also trained to provide resources. If somebody calls and they're in need of maybe another program in a different county, our advocates are also trained to, quickly look for a resource similar to ours in whatever county they're in, or if it's out of the state, they'll provide that resource. Whatever the caller needs, they will try their best to connect them to the services that they need. Then our 24 hours emergency response program, or as we call it, call-outs. This program is to provide advocacy and support at a safe location where that survivor is at. What that means is that sometimes we'll get calls like from schools that, a child has disclosed either domestic violence at home or sexual assault or human trafficking. And our advocates are trained and are able to respond right then and there to the school to be able to provide that support for someone. Same with hospitals, law enforcement at like police stations, things like that. As long as it's safe and the survivor wants us to be there, an advocate is more than willing and happy to be there and provide the resources and the support that the survivor might need. Or if they have any more questions about Monarch and they kind of want to know how Monarch can support them, we can also do that. Of course, with COVID, especially during like the lockdown time, it was a little harder to do the whole in-person response. So we did have a protocol for over the phone. But now that, things are a little better with COVID, we go case by case, but that is that availability there to provide a response in person. Then we do have our emergency confidential shelter, which we will deeply go into that. We also have our sexual assault response team known as SART. And that's part of our also the 24-hour emergency response program. And that is when individuals have the exam after a sexual assault has been committed. Then we have our crisis intervention program, our children and youth program, our legal assistance program, and our prevention program. So that's kind of a short overview about all our different services, and we will dive into them.
Okay, so our on-call program and our 24-hour response encompasses both the call outs of physically going in person or via phone for advocacy, which Dahlia spoke about, and also those who work our crisis lines. So there's over 20 advocates that work the crisis line right now. I'm one that's included, and we respond via those calls to whatever incidents. So we'll respond to hospitals and clinics, whether it's for sexual assaults, domestic violence, or human trafficking incidences. So right now, about I would say 99% of our call outs are to Dominican hospital if it's to respond to a medical facility. Recently that got changed to Dominican. Before we had to go all the way over the hill to VMC to respond to sexual assault exams or SARTs. But now we're able to go to Dominican, and unless it's a youth, I believe, under the age of 12, then they still respond over the hill. But they also do domestic violence responses at Dominican. So it's really important to know that if you're a community member working with a survivor, that survivors have the right to have an advocate with them through that whole process, whether it's through reporting to law enforcement or at a medical facility. An advocate can be there with them to help explain the process and talk them through that. So that could be really helpful to know. The second thing is, we also respond to law enforcement interviews, domestic violence responses, pretext calls. So pretext calls is, or an interview, sometimes law enforcement will ask a survivor while during the process of reporting to go in and, give more details about the incidents, some more questioning. Or a pretext call is where the survivor will call the person who caused harm or the assaulter via phone with law enforcement to try to get, a confession or a response for more evidence. And so advocates also respond with the survivor to those incidences. Through the crisis line, we can also refer clients to our confidential shelter or motel program. We do provide motel vouchers in some instances, and that's through our confidential shelter program. I'm going to talk a little bit more about our shelter program later on, but we are able to do screenings for those things via the crisis line. And the motels is more consistent now because of COVID, but it's not necessarily a new service that we provide. But due to COVID safety and also physical safety, due to case by case, we're able to provide that confidential shelter for both of those. And then referrals, like Dahlia said before, all of our advocates on the crisis line are trained extensively in how to respond to these types of situations, and also how to on other community resources and how to refer clients based on their needs. So there's a lot of outreach and advocacy through the crisis line as well.
The next program we'll speak about is our crisis intervention program. I like to refer to this program kind of as the counseling support piece for survivors. Not only do we do the peer counseling support, meaning we help clients through the healing process and help them explore, their coping skills, what works for them. Boundaries, a lot of our clients, boundaries are non-existent in their cases. So we also explore boundaries. A lot of people are trying to learn what kind of boundaries work for them, what boundaries are. A lot of times our clients also need a lot of education around what is domestic violence, how can it look like? Because a lot of our community, at least here in Santa Cruz County, we assume you can see domestic violence, right? Like you can see the physical harm, but there's so much more to it that a lot of times our clients don't even realize that they've been in a domestic violence relationship for a very long time. So we do a lot of education as well. And a big piece of our work also is case management. We have a lot of advocates / case managers who really help clients not only heal and, like I mentioned, all the coping skills and things like that, but also connect them to other services that they may need. Follow up with them with other social services, whether that looks like HealthFresh, or maybe they're trying to like get a Section 8 voucher and they haven't been contacted from those worker. We really advocate to have them get that response that they are looking for. With case management as well, it allows us to kind of be with the survivor for a prolonger time instead of just doing like the sessions and then ending it there. We can provide a little more long-term support for the survivor. We do with the crisis intervention program, we do have therapist services, which this process looks like the survivor coming in, doing an intake with us. And then if determined that they need a little bit more support or it's a little bit out of our reach, we do have contracted therapists who we refer survivors to, who specialize in these type of violence like sexual assault, domestic violence, and human trafficking. Under the crisis intervention program as well, we have our legal program, which I will talk about in the next slide. Then we have support groups. So a lot of times people, they're not sure if they want to do the individual counseling or they prefer like to be in a group setting. So we do have support groups. With our support groups, we have one in Spanish and one in English. Our Spanish one is Tuesdays at 6 p.m. and our English one is Wednesdays at 6 p.m. During non-COVID times, they would be held at the office. But currently they're being held via Zoom. We encourage everyone to try out both, the counseling and the support group and see what fits best for them. A lot of times clients right in the beginning, they'll do both. And then once they feel ready, like they'll stop doing the individual counseling and they'll just attend support group or vice versa. Whatever works for the client, we're here to adjust our services to what the client needs. And for the support group, you don't necessarily need to be constantly seeing an advocate, but you do, if you ever refer someone or yourself, when you do call our crisis line or our office, there is a little short screening that gets done in order to attend support group, but that's about it. Then of course you can get crisis intervention through the crisis line. And then we do serve, we are now serving those who cause harm. In other words, the abuser. The program is called Positive Solutions. This is a group setting program. And in this program, we really focus on helping the individuals replace their abusive behaviors with non-aggressive behaviors. And we do this through talking about, their childhood wounds. I had the privilege to run this group, our first group, and I can say that 100% of the clients in that group all had some type of child abuse when they were young. Of course, not excusing the abusive behavior, definitely not. They need to be held accountable. But, we think about it in the sense of, if it's domestic violence, right? And then they end up separating, the survivor decides to leave. They're in a safe space now. We're helping them out. But what happens to the person who does harm? They're still in our community. They're going to have new partners and, the cycle is going to continue. So we have to also be able to target the person causing harm in order, to kind of fulfill our mission, which is having lives free of violence and abuse. So with that program, people can self-refer, meaning they can call the crisis line or the office and schedule an intake. Or a lot of times also our referrals do come from court mandated. So a judge will mandate them to do this program. Other times, Children Protective Services, are now known as Children and Family Services, will have this as part of their reunification plan that they need to complete. Currently, our program is, it's in session. It's closed currently right now, and it's for males. We do hope in the future, once our community members and donors and other people see that this program, is working, we can achieve more funding to be able to open it up in Spanish as well, as it's very needed in the south of our county. And also for females or those who identify as females. And then we also provide support to incarcerated survivors. So we do counseling and advocacy and case management for the women at Santa Cruz County Main Jail, and also the Blaine facility, which is right behind the main jail. Our advocates prior to COVID would respond in person. You would do your sessions there. Obviously now with all of this, they do it through their system of kind of Zoom, but it's a different system. But yes, a lot of times incarcerated survivors don't know that they still have rights, especially when it comes to sexual assault and getting assaulted in the facility. So we really try to push so those who are incarcerated know that they have rights, and that if they are assaulted, regardless if it's by another inmate or a correctional officer, they have rights and they should feel supported. So they can reach out to us. How that usually works, and I used to also do this at the county jails. They have phones and they have to have money on their books, as it's called, but to contact the crisis line directly and not get charged, they just dial like this special number that should be posted right there next to the phone, and they automatically get connected to us. And they don't need to have any like money in their account or whatever they do there. So that's really important for if anyone here who's like a service provider or works with that population, do inform them that they can contact our crisis line directly without having any money in their account. And that's kind of the crisis intervention program. Is there any questions regarding our crisis intervention program?
There was one question in the chat, which was if the crisis intervention services were free, and the answer is yes. All of Monarch services are free and bilingual, as Maria responded, I see now. But yes, all of Monarch services are free.
Yes, thank you, Aileen.
Yes.
So then, as I mentioned, the legal services, we do have a legal program, and she is a paralegal, and her job entails going to accompany survivors to court. She also assists with restraining orders and immigration support. So with the restraining orders, what that looks like is when somebody is filing for a restraining order, they have to fill out all this paperwork and they have to write a declaration. So kind of write why they're requesting a restraining order. So she helps survivors understand, what the paperwork means, explains what that declaration kind of needs to look like. And she really tries to support them as best as she can to fully understand the process, especially with those individuals who maybe have never dealt with the court system. They have so many forms, so many different names to them. So she really tries her best to help them understand what that is, what every form is about, so they are fully aware of everything going on in that process. For court accompaniments, a lot of times when it comes with the restraining orders, they do have to go to a court hearing. So she goes with them not only to kind of explain, but also to provide that emotional support that Monarch Services advocates do, and to also let them debrief after, check in with them. And, just so they don't feel alone, because it can be a very scary process. And then when it comes to immigration support, she does help file and again, understand the paperwork behind the U visa, which the U visa is for individuals who have been victims of a crime. And she, lets the survivors know what it is, what paperwork it is that's needed, and things like that, so they can apply for it. What's very important about the U visas for anyone who works with individuals is that when it comes to the U visa and there's a police report made, which there has to be one, we have to make sure that that person filing is stated as the victim in the police report, because that's what they're looking for when you apply. So that's kind of, what I want everybody to remember about the U visas. And that's what our paralegal also looks for when somebody's coming in looking for services around the U visa. And then with legal services, if it's something out of our scope or that we can't help, of course we have referrals out. We do refer out for child custody and divorce. Our paralegal cannot directly assist with that, but she does know a few places where they do assist with that. One of them being the Watsonville Law Center, and then also the Self-Help Desk Center at the courthouse, which that's a great resource as well, just so everybody to have that handy. The self-help desk is very resourceful. So for child custody, divorce, and other things like so, our paralegal does not assist directly, but she does refer to somewhere that we know can help them.
Great. So now we're going to talk a little bit about our emergency confidential shelter. I'm one of the advocates that work there during the evening. So I'm going to hopefully give you guys a better idea about this resource, because I know it's not as many people in the community know about this service that we provide. So our confidential shelter is actually the only confidential shelter in all of Santa Cruz County, which is something that we're really proud of, and that it's really important for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault to be able to have access to a safe home where the location is not disclosed. Not even law enforcement knows the address of our confidential shelter. Only the advocates within Monarch Services know that address, because in this line of work, you never know who could be someone who's causing someone harm. So it's important that we keep everyone safe in that way. We do have advocates on site for the majority of the day, from early in the morning till night, and then the clients are there at night. Then we have on-call support 24 hours a day. So even though we don't have advocates physically there 24/7 all the time, we do have that support via the crisis line. And we're very flexible, obviously, depending on situations. Case by case, the length of the stay at our confidential shelter varies. Certain families are there for quite a bit of time, whatever we deem is needed for their case. And some people are in and out, and it's a pretty quick transition to their next steps. But really our goal is to get everything together for them in order for them to have a safe place on their own to stay and really become independent. I like to think of it kind of like an airport where, people come in and then they stay for the time that they need until they're ready to move on to like their new destination and their new life. But we do have private family rooms. So each family would be able to have their own room, or sometimes it's not families, it's single individuals, or just like mom and kids. We serve everybody. And we have the capacity to serve up to 7. We have 7 rooms, so up to 7 families and 21 beds. And so the family rooms are individual, and then the shared rooms would be like the kitchen, the living room, and bathrooms are also communal. And so during this COVID time, we do ask that families and members of the shelter program wear their masks while in all communal living spaces for the safety of others. But while they're in their own room with just, their children or their family, they can, not wear a mask. And then so we do offer educational workshops and support groups on site during clients' stay at shelter. So we do a lot of education around domestic violence, what that looks like, the cycle of abuse. And then they do get referrals out to our housing program. They see a counseling therapy, and then we do also have support groups that are attended weekly by our clients who live in the house. And then, as I said before, all gender identities and individuals are welcome. A lot of shelters don't necessarily serve men. And so that's also something that we do that's a little bit different. Anyone can be a survivor of domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking. And we try to make everyone aware of that as much as possible, right? Like, just because someone identifies as male or not female doesn't mean that they can't be a survivor. And that's often a big barrier that survivors come to, right? Is that people might not believe them right away. So we believe one of our things is if you call us and tell us your story, we're here to believe you and to support you. And then going on to motel services, our motel vouchering is part of the shelter program. During the peak of COVID, we would do a lot more motel vouchering in order to make sure that we weren't bringing anything into the shelter facility with the families already living there in order to avoid an outbreak as much as possible. And sometimes, if we have a client, let's say after a sexual assault exam and they need 2 nights to get everything together and create a plan before they go stay with a friend, like we can motel voucher them instead of bringing them all the way into the house and then having to move them out. So that's just really an attachment of our confidential shelter services. And like I said, case by case, depending on safety of location of the shelter and all that stuff, it's a really good option. And then our children and youth program. So our children and youth program is actually just like our crisis intervention program, but for youth. We serve ages 5 through 18. And depending on the case, sometimes we do transitional aged youth through this program as well, which is ages 18 to 25. So our advocates specialize in child and youth preventative programs, education about domestic violence, sexual assault. They serve youth who have directly been affected by trauma, as well as witnessed trauma in the home, because that can also have a big impact on, kids' perception of what relationships look like and what they should be looking for. Our advocates work a lot with a program called Window Between Worlds activities, which are interactive art, play activities that get kids, especially younger ones, talking about their feelings and, their experiences and being able to open up like that. So that's a big tool that we use. And then we often refer to this program as the CY program. So if you hear that, it's the Children and Youth Program. And our advocates can also respond in person. So similar to our on-call advocates that respond to medical facilities and such, these advocates can also respond to law enforcement offices, a Sky Center, which is a children's interview center here in Santa Cruz, where they will do interviews if a child discloses, let's say, assault or domestic violence. It's a child-friendly room where only one person will interview the kid. And then there's a window where the detective and the DA can listen in and the kid can't see them. So that way the child only has to tell their story one time, instead of repeating it over and over again to all these different adults, which can really be re-traumatizing and make someone not want to report, especially if they're young. And a child advocate can respond to that as well and support the child as well as the family or a support person who brings them there. And then they will also respond to VMC Hospital, the Valley Medical Center over the hill, which is where they conduct child sexual assault exams. They don't yet do that here at Dominican. So we have to go over the hill for that child advocacy center. Is there anything else to add about child and youth, Dahlia? Okay. Then we're good.
Alrighty, then we have our prevention program or education and community outreach. And though our focus, is to target youth, it's very important for us in this program to educate and provide awareness to the community as a whole, meaning, from the smallest child to the oldest adult living in a home. Also to service providers, other community partnering agencies, and law enforcement. So we provide education or workshops at schools. Currently right now, it depends on the school. Sometimes they want us to do in person, sometimes they want us to do virtual. We are flexible either way. A lot of times schools, the topics that they request are like teen dating violence, healthy communication, social media safety, online bullying, things like that. Just because, as we know, technology and social media is very active with our youth, and a lot of sexual harassment goes on social media as well, and things of that sort. So we do provide a lot of those topics, but either way, whatever the school is that they need. So if they notice there's a lot of students who maybe are disclosing, let's say, teen dating violence with their partners, then that's kind of what they want us to focus on. So we'll plan, or we'll edit and adjust our presentation to specifically target that. We had a few schools who have had a lot of sexual harassment online, so we hosted a whole workshop around that to really help students not only learn about it, but also identify how it looks like. And also, if they are the person causing the harm, helping them understand why it is that it's not okay, and things of that sort. So that's what we try to target with our youth. With community partners and service providers, it could be other nonprofits, sometimes as well, like Janice of Santa Cruz has requested for us to, help them understand a little bit around domestic violence a little more. Hospitals or nurses, whoever needs, to gain a better understanding of warning signs, things of that nature, we're more than happy to go and, talk about those things. If it's a workshop, if it's a training that you want, if it's just information, we're more than happy to do so. I want to highlight that human trafficking is a topic that doesn't get talked about a lot, and people have a lot of misconceptions around what a human trafficking survivor looks like. So human trafficking is usually one of the top topics that community partners and service providers request, just because, there's no clear signs as much as like maybe domestic violence or sexual assault. So that's a topic that is very popular. And we're always happy, to share knowledge around that, because we know that it's not a topic that a lot of people fully understand, or there's a lot of misconceptions around it. And with law enforcement, I want to clarify that it's not that we directly, partner up with them, but it's more or less we help them be a little more trauma informed when they're responding to, like, a domestic violence call, or when they're approaching a survivor that has just been assaulted, the questions that they ask, the way that they present themselves, and just so they can be a little more trauma informed. That way, the survivor can feel a little bit more comfortable with them. And of course, we also provide them with all the tools to reach out to us, meaning they can call the crisis line, they can call, the on-call advocates, the managers, and request for us to go. There's no reason why a survivor should not have access to an advocate with them when they are being interviewed or questioned, or whatever the case may be, by law enforcement. So we make sure to let law enforcement know how that process looks like. And, we usually provide these trainings to our local police departments, which entails like Watsonville Police Department, Capitola, Santa Cruz, the sheriff's office. We also do, trainings to the correctional officers to be more trauma informed, to know a little bit more about the services that we provide for the in custody survivors, as I mentioned in the other slide, just so they're all aware, and there really is no excuse to not connect the survivor to services. So that's what the education piece looks like. We do community outreach. Of course, now with COVID, it's looked very different. We've had to get creative. But in non-COVID times, we'd be out there in the community when there's like events, just putting our name out there, making sure the community knows that we're here. It's free, it's bilingual, and we're here to offer our services. With that being said, I talked about trainings and workshops, but we launched our webinar series, which this is the first one, the second time around. So last year we launched it. We obviously knew that with COVID, we had to see a different way to be doing the type of things that we're doing. So we started our webinar series. Each month we have a different topic. This time around that we started again, we decided to start off with our services in general. But then, when October comes around, that's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Then we have Sexual Assault Awareness Month, Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. So we try the best to correlate, the months with our webinars, our monthly webinars. But yeah, we look forward, to starting our new session of webinars. And that's another part of our prevention services. And then we also do on-campus support groups. So this one's kind of like a tag team with our CNY program, our Children and Youth program. They have a support group at Pajaro Valley High School and Watsonville High School. Our goal as prevention is to kind of, gain more partnership with different schools to at some point hope that every school can have a support group, just so students have a safe place to go and talk about, either if they're witnessing violence or if something is happening to them, but that can be provided. And we also try our best to leave that open when it comes to social media. So we do have a main agency, Instagram, Facebook, and all of that, but we also have one targeting youth specifically. So we really want youth, to feel comfortable, take a look, at our different, the different faces that work like in the Children and Youth program, the prevention program, and just kind of get a sense of maybe knowing us a little better. And they can also feel free to reach out via that way, if they want to send a DM on the Instagram, and we'll try our best, to connect them somewhere. But that's also another way that youth can come in contact with us, definitely. So then we have had some changes, obviously related to COVID-19, and I know me and Eileen have both spoken about them, but the biggest one is that, of course, we had to go remote. And during all of COVID, all our services have either been through the phone or video, as we're here today. And these changes have really, opened up our minds to see how, we have to be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more creative to really be able to provide that support to survivors, which we have also noticed that, domestic violence and abuse has increased during this time. So our services have been, working through the COVID-19. Of course, with COVID-19, we can make exceptions. It just depends case by case, the severity of the case and things like that. We can, make that exception to see the person in person. It just depends, but we do have that flexibility. And then, of course, we changed our outreach and education events and efforts online, as I just mentioned. And also there's been a few changes when it comes to our motel placements and shelter. And I will let Maria explain a little bit about that.
Thank you, Dahlia and Aileen. So yes, unfortunately to report, during COVID, we saw a 60% increase in not only crisis line calls, but services throughout our agency. Our shelter program was one of our programs that saw an immense or extreme increase as well, where we served probably triple to fourth of what we normally do. Many of these survivors who reached out to Monarch during this time were placed in motels for safety reasons and, of course, health reasons, and to ensure that, once again, there was a plan in place for them to be successful. Motel placements, the way that works is that if you as a community partner are interested in making a referral for any survivor of domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking, you are more than welcome to call our crisis line and connect them with us. A couple things that I wanted to mention, and that is Monarch Services' goal is to empower survivors and ensure that their readiness for our services. Many times survivors are not ready to seek that service or receive education around these different topics, right? Because they're topics that can be very difficult. So how can you as a community partner be able to support that? Is contacting us through the crisis line, giving us more information, but also directing them to um, take that role of making that call, as we want to make sure that we're speaking directly to them to understand what their needs are. Once you make that referral, we are happy to speak with them and do a very brief screening to be able to determine what is the safest location for us to place them in a motel. We work with various motels in Santa Cruz County, prioritizing our county residents to ensure of their safety. While we're doing the screenings, we want to make sure that it's not only safe for our survivor, but also for our advocates as they are placing them in the different motels, ensuring that the person who causes harm doesn't live within the vicinity of the motel. Once they're placed in the motel, our survivors then are followed up by our shelter advocates to ensure that there is more continuity of care, from providing essentials to making referrals, as well as ensuring that there is all their needs met, from food to gift cards. We want to just make sure that they're safe throughout their stay. While our survivors are in the motel, it is part of our shelter program. There are rights and responsibilities to ensure of their safety, and that is, for example, some examples might be following COVID protocols, ensuring that they're not disclosing the location of the motel they're staying in, to ensure of their safety. Once they're in the motel, there is because of the COVID reasons, as Dahlia mentioned, we had to make some of these changes for health reasons. And so we monitor their health and their stay, and then they are transferred to our shelter program if that is what they choose at that point, and the readiness as well. Many survivors do not require or do not need longer than a couple days to just think about and develop a safety plan. Many times our survivors have a plan. They just need someone to run it through and have the discussion with. And that's where our advocates come in to provide that support. And so that is our motel placement. Again, as Eileen mentioned earlier, our motel and our shelter program really is a case by case. Everyone is welcome to call our crisis line and ask questions if needed. If you're ever uncertain about, is this someone who might be able to receive services with Monarch in any way or form, please just make that referral, call our crisis line, ask questions. We are available to ensure that these survivors are receiving the services that unfortunately are not as well known in our community at this point. Delia, do you want to go to the next slide? Okay.
Yes, so now we're going to talk a little bit about how you as a support person could support a survivor in your life, whether it's as a community employee and it's a client of yours, or if it's just a friend or a family member. The most important thing that you do as a support person is to listen and believe them. A lot of times this is the biggest barrier that survivors come across in sharing their story and asking for support and getting those services, is that they've come across someone who doesn't believe them, right? Whether it's someone who's like, oh, I know so-and-so, they would never do that to you, or I don't believe that would happen to you, you're overreacting. So that's a big thing, is just remembering to listen to them and believe them, because that can go a long way in allowing someone to take those next steps in getting the support. Advocate for them. If they need help calling a crisis line or calling a friend for support, you can sit there with them and advocate for them and support them. But really, listening and letting them know that you're there isn't the most important. At Monarch, we encourage people to provide options, not opinions. That's part of the empowerment model we like to focus on, is of empowering survivors to make decisions for themselves. A lot of times those decisions are taken away from them. So it's really important that we empower people to make these choices. And so our advocates at Monarch, and we would encourage you all as support people to provide options. Don't necessarily tell them, hey, you need to do this. If they're not ready to call a crisis line, that's fine. They don't need to call. But if they are ready, it's nice that they know that it's an option for them and that it's there for when they choose to make that choice. Help with safety planning. I like to think of this as like an emergency thing, like support plan, safety plan. If they're not ready to leave a relationship, that's okay. Let's think of a way that we can make sure that if you are ready, or if you change your mind, or if something happens, you have a plan of what you're going to do. Whether that's like, I've done go bags with clients before where they have like emergency stuff in their car for if they decide they need to go, or they just put the crisis line phone number in their phone. They have a friend's house they can go to if they decide they need help. So safety planning around what their next steps would be is always really important. If it's, say your friend discloses that they think they were assaulted, and they know the person, then like maybe safety planning around, okay, do you have a class with them? Where do you see them? Like, how can we make sure we keep you safe while you figure out what your next steps are going to be? Reminding them that it's not their fault. Even if someone knows that it's not their fault, there's a lot of self-blame that goes into being a survivor of domestic violence, human trafficking, and sexual assault. And so it's really important that you remind them that it's not their fault, but also you tell them that you don't think it's their fault, right? Like that's really critical in them being able to get the courage to advocate for themselves and share their story, because that's a really brave thing to do. So telling them, that you appreciate them sharing with you. Don't speak about the abuser, speak about the abuse. Talk to them about what happened, not necessarily about who did this to you. In domestic violence relationships, there's a lot of, care that still, someone can still really care for that person. So making sure you separate the person and the violence is important in order for someone to maybe understand a little bit deeper that they are being treated wrongly and that they deserve better. Determine a support system, talk them through about where they could possibly go. Do you have friends, family, people you want to call that you feel safe with? Do you want to call Monarch? Do you have no one that you feel safe with? So talking about that, and then providing resources. Like we mentioned before, most counties have a program like us. And if you don't know that program, you can call us and we can help you connect with them. We can help provide other resources as well, depending on the case. But just remembering really to listen and to offer support when they want it. And then how to refer to Monarch, you can call our 24-hour crisis line, which is 1-888-900-4232. And then we also have 2 offices, one in Watsonville and one in Santa Cruz. If you're calling to get referred to the crisis intervention program for like a weekly meeting with an advocate, you're more than welcome to ask through the crisis line, but also calling our offices directly to set up an appointment is more than welcome. So our Watsonville office number is 831-722-4532. And then the Santa Cruz office is 831-425-4030. And so I don't know if you guys want to take a screenshot of that or make sure you jot it down. But really the crisis line is an important number to know, and that's how you would get in contact with us. We also have a website, which is Monarch Services, monarchscc.org, and that has all of our resources on it as well. And if you see in the chat, we have Facebook, Instagram accounts that are also posted there, and that would have recordings of these webinars, information, as well as contact information for our advocates. Any questions?
So now
Here we have.
So now we want to open up for questions in regards to all of our services. If you have specific questions about a specific program, as well as how you as a community partner or as a friend or as a first responder, which is very important to acknowledge. Anytime that we are one of the first responders, we are the first person that this survivor might connect to. So it is essential that what Aileen mentioned earlier is believing them, but also how can you connect them with the services. And of course, we also included some of our information to make sure that if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to email us and ask those questions as well. So we're going to go ahead and stop the sharing, and then we're going to see if anyone has questions in regards to our services. Does anyone have any questions about our services? Couple things that I wanted to point out is Monarch Services is very invested in a holistic approach in serving the whole family. Many times our survivors do not leave a situation for various reasons, and it is important to note and support that as we are developing that safety plan. Our goal is to make sure that there is continuity of care. So this is one of our goals when we bring together our webinars and our information presentations to make sure that we work together as a community to ensure that that continuity of care and that communication happens amongst us as well. In addition to that, as well, is that survivors have options in various ways. One of the things that we didn't mention earlier with our sexual assault or SAFE program is that survivors have the option of either going through a sexual assault examination with law enforcement, which is a reporting piece, or they are also more than welcome to go through a non-investigative where law enforcement is not involved. That is what Monarch does, is just really provide all these resources, but also options for survivors to make sure that of their readiness. Again, we want to thank you for being here. And if you have any questions, feel free to call our crisis line, feel free to email us, and we're more than happy to provide that support to you or any of your individuals that you might serve. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Really, really awesome presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.